what we call our heritage garden, and I feel that, and we're just honored, of course, to have our honored guest with us today, and it makes my job a little bit more difficult because he's going to be closely monitoring, I'm sure, the comments I make about how I designed this garden and how I built into it my great respect for Thomas Jefferson. Now, first of all, I might tell you that about 6 years ago, I started collecting live English boxwood plants from famous locations. Birthplace of founding fathers, presidents, people that had held very important roles in our history. And so it was important to me to put these somewhere, and I visioned somehow just on my property here so that I could walk around and now and then look at a certain plant and refresh my mind about what this person contributed to our fine democracy. And I thought I'd enjoy it that way. And I kept these plants growing. I still acquired more and more. And suddenly I had big pots all around my back area here, because I didn't put them in the ground because I couldn't decide what design I was going to use. But I had come to the conclusion then that I wanted a kind of formal garden, the kind that you see trimmed with topiaries and neatly cared for and in brick walls and things like that. You know the kind of one I'm talking about. Well, one day I was reading some of my material about my favorite, President Jefferson. And in one of the books that I was reading, I came across a diagram of the house in Poplar Forest that he had designed as a retreat or vacation home. And it was a kind of a cutaway. It was kind of like you had taken the house and sawed it off about 6 feet up, and the walls and all were in there, everything was in place, and you could just kind of look down on it. And suddenly it hit me just like a bell. That's a garden. And so, folks, what you see today is a result of that impression. And that is the walls of this garden here are exactly on the footprint size of Poplar Forest, to the inch. And the windows are in exactly the places that they should be, to the inch. The doors are the width they should be, the kind they'd be. Now, of course, this is a garden, not a house, and so wrought iron instead of regular doors were used at the front because we wanted to say garden as opposed to house. But the back doors, when we're not serving through them as they are today, close, and they're the regular doors like Poplar Forest that too again got caught in that old chainsaw. It went around. But pardon me, we don't have chainsaws yet, but I think they're coming at some point in the future. Therefore, the inside is the exact layout of the floor plan of Poplar Forest. Now, the president went to, as a representative of the new government after the formation and the declaration and so forth, went to Paris to represent this country. And he stayed there 5 years, and he learned some very interesting things that he wanted to bring back. Now, many of you visited probably Poplar Forest or Monticello, and you know that in the president's home and in his retreat home, he designed what he called alcove beds that he came across in Paris. These alcove beds were actually, the foot and head of the bed were walls that went up all the way to the top. And then as you went around this wall, the bed is in between two walls, and you could get in or out of the bed from either room on the side. Now here, as you see, in each of the rooms and exactly the location of the alcove beds are the alcove beds. Generally speaking, of course, the boxwood represents a wall that, if you visualize, would go on up, and the in-between is the bed, and you could walk in this door, go in a door here, and get in the bed, and this is why the alcove doors. Now, he brought back a lot of good ideas. Another idea he brought back was, you know, we all have cooked on fireplaces all of our lives with nothing better. And the stove has not been invented yet, but that's something I think is coming too. And therefore, he found in Paris and in France them using a very, what he thought, innovative stove. Instead of having to bend and cook over the fireplace all the time, or put it on a crane and hang out and put it out into the room to stir, he built what he calls, and they call in France, a stew stove. With that, you take red hot coals from the fireplace itself that you kept firing 24 hours a day probably, and then you took these coals and put them in a stew stove. And folks, here is a stew stove exactly through the design that Jefferson brought back. It was surrounded by masonry or brickwork, and there is a grate here just inside, about 4 inches down. Of course, you're free to take a look at it. And you take coals from the fire, you put here on this, and then put it back and put your pot on the top. And it makes hot fire, and you know, I wasn't aware of this until the president demonstrated it, of course, and that is that a red hot fire coal that has burned through and through but yet remains red hot does not smoke. And so therefore it's not necessary to have a chimney on that stew stove. There's usually a window located just up above it to take off the heat and the hot air, and any fumes that might develop from something that gets on the fire. So this is a stew stove here, and it's in the location. Now here again, these shrubs represent the exact floor plan, and there's going to be a fireplace in every room, as you have probably determined if you've visited with the president in any of his homes. There's a fireplace, and of course, my shrubbery is in its infancy. But as the years pass, hopefully, these are going to be built, and to the point they will be trimmed so that you recognize fireplace where a fireplace ought to be, and so forth and so on. These plantings right beside the windows are going to be the drapes. Someday they'll be trimmed to be. But you are being in on the very infancy of this thing, just starting, and I'm delighted to share it with you.